and welcome to episode 20 of For Ilyse. Today, my sister Hope and I are going to show you the story of Saint Bernadette. We filmed this when Hope was over here visiting me. We were filming a lot of things from Giselle, so you'll actually recognize some of the costumes, but we switched who was wearing them. So I became Saint Bernadette's mother, and Hope wore the mother costume, and Hope became Saint Bernadette and wore Giselle's costume. And then I even used the ghost costume, but you won't really recognize it when I'm the miraculous vision from heaven. So, Saint Bernadette was a very ordinary girl. Her family was very poor. They were peasants in France, in the city of Lourdes. And Saint Bernadette used to have to help her parents quite a bit around the house because they were very poor, and she was always willing to help. Bernadette was not very well educated because she didn't have time to go to school. Her family just couldn't afford that. She did go to Sunday school, where she learned how to pray. And she was very devoted to the Lord, and she knew that she could please the Lord by helping around the house and praying.
Many people would have said that this girl Bernadette would never amount to anything. But God's ways are not our ways. And so often God, who can do everything, chooses people who can do very little or almost nothing to do his greatest, to carry out his greatest plans. Saint Bernadette's favorite prayer was the Rosary. The Rosary is a very simple prayer. It's very long, but you say the same thing over and over and over again. It is a prayer mostly to ask Mary, the Mother of God, to pray for us.
Bernadette, do you think you could go gather some firewood for us?
Of course, Mother.
Thank you.
Whenever Bernadette's parents asked her to help out with anything, she was always very happy to help. So this particular day, Bernadette went down to some local woods to gather firewood. In these woods, there was what's called a grotto, which is a steep hill, and there was kind of like a little cave there. But this was not a classy grotto. This was basically a garbage dump. So Bernadette was here in this garbage dump type area gathering firewood when she saw something very out of the ordinary. Now, mind you, this was a garbage dump. Rich people wouldn't come here. This wasn't a place where you would see anything beautiful or classy, except, if you consider nature beautiful, then sure, you'd see nature, but... Well, this lady just shows up, and she doesn't look like anyone Bernadette's ever seen. It's just so beautiful, and Bernadette was a little scared. She started to pray, and the lady started to pray with her. Well, Bernadette was very, very drawn to this beautiful lady, and she wanted to see her again. So as soon as Bernadette got another chance, she went back to the same grotto where she had gathered firewood before. To see if she could find the lady. And sure enough, when Bernadette knelt at the grotto and started to pray, the lady showed up again. The mysterious lady asked Bernadette to come back and and see her. I think it was once a week or something like that. Anyways, Bernadette very eagerly agreed. She felt that there was something special about this beautiful lady who would appear and pray with her. Well, Bernadette was a teenager, and if you know anything about teenagers usually do not keep secrets very well. So it wasn't long before Bernadette's parents found out. And Bernadette's parents were not happy about this mysterious lady. They didn't know what to make of it. They didn't think their daughter would lie, but they also didn't think she was telling the truth. And this just sounded like bad news from beginning to end. They tried their best to hush her up and just get her to not talk about it, not go back to see the lady. But Bernadette just knew that she had to. She had to see this lady again. It was just so important. She couldn't really always explain why. You know, teenagers are like that sometimes. They can't always explain how they feel, but this was just something really important. So Bernadette came back over and over again. Sometimes she was prevented, but it was generally every week she would come back to see the lady, and they would pray together for a total of, I believe, 14 visions. There was a fair amount of hullabaloo in the town of Lourdes as word began to get around that this teenager was seeing this mysterious lady. Other people went to the grotto and nobody but Bernadette could see the lady. That sounded a little weird. There were people who thought that this was a vision from heaven. But there were also people who thought that it could be something demonic, that this could be witchcraft, and there were people who also thought that Bernadette could be crazy. Bernadette herself ended up talking quite a bit about this to her parish priest. And the parish priest questioned her carefully, listened. He concluded that she was not crazy, and he wanted to know where this vision was coming from. Because the Catholics believe there are many spiritual beings, some good and some evil. So he said, ask the lady what is her name. So Bernadette obediently went to see the lady, planning to ask her name.
Lovely lady, can you tell me? The priest asked me to ask you, what's your name? Who are you? Can't you tell me?
Go. I am the Immaculate Conception.
Yes. I am the Immaculate Conception. She said, I am the Immaculate Conception. She said, I am the Immaculate Conception. The Immaculate Conception. The Immaculate Conception. I am the Immaculate Conception, she said.
Bernadette carefully repeated exactly what the lady had told her. But those were big words, and Bernadette was not educated. She had absolutely no idea what those words meant. By heaven's standards, we're all sinners. We all do things we shouldn't. So that meant to pray for everyone to come to know and love God more. And the lady was very, passionate. You've got to pray for sinners and do penance for them. Penance meaning to offer up suffering for people to grow closer to God. And the lady said, dig in the ground and drink from the spring that is there. Now, there wasn't any spring of water there in this trash pile grotto. But Bernadette dug, she found a little mud, and since there was no water to drink, she ate the mud. The lady told her to drink from the spring, and well, alright. And the lady had also told her to wash in the mud, in the water, so she washed her face in the mud. Which, at this point, people seriously thought that Bernadette was crazy. But after Bernadette dug, first of all, it was unusual that there would be mud that close to the surface. And a little water started to come up. and a little more, and eventually there was a spring. It didn't take too long either. Now, some people believed that Bernadette was crazy, or something was wrong here, but others believed that this was from heaven. So, at one point, someone who had a serious injury, I forget the exact originals, who was the first, but somebody washed their long-term injury in that spring, and immediately they were healed. And word got around, and other people who had diseases, injuries, things that with the medicine of the time could never have been healed, started coming to bathe in the spring. And in those early times, right after the lady had appeared and had her dig the spring, it was pretty much everyone who bathed in that spring was healed.
To this day, the spring at Lourdes, which was dug by Saint Bernadette and miraculously started a spring of water, the spring is still around, and healings are still reported from it. It's not everyone anymore. I've often both heard and also experienced in my own life that God will sometimes do a lot of miracles around a particular person, place, or event, and it'll be a crazy amount of miracles at that time, and then it'll kind of trickle off. And just, there won't be so many miracles, or there won't be any. So that's kind of what happened at Lourdes. There are still miracles, frequently actually, but not every time. Meanwhile, Bernadette went back to the priest and repeated this formula the sentence the lady had said, "I am the Immaculate Conception." And the priest just freaked out and walked away. And Bernadette was like, "Oh my gosh, did I say something bad?" Actually she hadn't. But the Immaculate Conception was big news in the Catholic Church. It had been declared by the Pope. It's something about that Mary, the mother of Jesus, could be called the Immaculate Conception. She'd been given this new title by the Pope just a couple weeks before, and nobody except the higher-up priests had ever heard of it. There was no way that this uneducated peasant girl who didn't even know what those words meant would have known that. So this was like proof that this was from heaven. And then there were the healings and stuff. So at this point it was known that this was a vision from heaven. Now Bernadette herself, at this point, quietly went off and became a nun. She lived a quiet life. She was not well known. Someone asked her about the visions at one point, and she said, "Well, I feel like a broom. There was a time in my life when God picked up the broom and he swept the room clean with it. And then he put me back in the closet, and now I'm just back in the closet." But she was content because she trusted God so much that it was okay with her to have a season in her life where she was God's instrument and a season where she was just a broom in the closet, as she put it. Bernadette died of tuberculosis. She insisted that she could not go to that spring for healing because the lady had told her the spring was not for her. So she accepted death from tuberculosis. On her deathbed, she was still answering questions about this mysterious lady. And her body remains incorrupt, meaning her body never rotted. They used to dig up saints to find out whether or not their bodies rotted. It's a tradition, a very strange old tradition. Well, so if you liked this, I suggest that you watch a movie called The Song of Bernadette. It goes into the story of Saint Bernadette in much more detail than I can, much bigger cast. It's an old black and white classic, beautifully done. And it tells the story of Saint Bernadette from shortly before she had the visions until she died. Alright, so that's The Song of Bernadette. And until next time,